Welcome to the Anti-Trafficking Response Academy by International Rescue Committee. This video delves into the link between human trafficking and forced marriages. Forced marriage happens when one or both people are married without giving their full and free consent. It becomes trafficking when the marriage is not just unwanted, but is used as a means to exploit a person. In this video, we will explore the definition of forced marriage. When forced marriage becomes a form of human trafficking, the scale of the issue worldwide and the legal framework. And finally, the forms of exploitation in forced marriages. First, let's discuss various terms that often appear in discussions about forced marriage. Let's start with the definition. Forced marriage is marriage without full consent of one or both intending spouses. An arranged marriage is not the same as a forced marriage. In an arranged marriage, families take a leading role in choosing potential partners, but both individuals still have the freedom to choose whether they want to enter into the marriage. In a forced marriage, that freedom is taken away. There is no genuine consent. Forced marriage can involve both children and adults, but it is closely linked to child marriage because many victims are under 18. Child marriage refers to any marriage in which at least one person is under 18. These marriages are often considered forced, as it is considered that children cannot give full, free, and informed consent. Forced marriage is not always considered human trafficking, but it constitutes human trafficking when it involves the act, means, and purpose of exploitation listed in the definition of human trafficking. This can include recruitment, transport, or harboring of a person through coercion, threats, fraud, or abuse of vulnerability, with the purpose that the spouse, their family, or third parties use the other for exploitation or economic gain. First, forced marriage can be connected to the act of trafficking, such as recruitment or harboring, when marriage is used to lure a spouse into a situation of exploitation. Second, forced marriage can be the means by which someone is brought into a trafficking situation. This occurs when a person is forced to marry through threats, coercion, or fraud, and the marriage creates the conditions that enable later exploitation. Third, forced marriage itself can constitute a form of exploitation, which is central to trafficking in human beings. In some cases, individuals are lured with false job offers and trafficked for the purpose of entering a forced marriage. To summarize, while forcing someone into marriage is a serious violation in itself, doing so with the purpose of exploiting the person constitutes a form of human trafficking. Forced marriage is treated differently under the laws of different countries. The Palermo Protocol does not explicitly list forced marriage as a type of human trafficking, but trafficking definition will apply if the marriage involves exploitation. Some countries already include forced marriage as a form of exploitation in their national anti-trafficking legislation, and the EU Anti-Trafficking Directive was updated in 2024 to explicitly add forced marriage, alongside surrogacy and illegal adoption, as a form of exploitation covered by EU anti-trafficking law. Some countries see a marriage without full consent as exploitation on its own. Others only recognize exploitation if additional abuses occur, like sexual exploitation, forced labor, or violence. The level of exploitation and the offender's intent also matter. Globally, countries classify forced marriage in three main ways: as a form of human trafficking, as a slavery-like practice, or as a separate crime. Although nearly all countries have some legislation relating to forced, child, or early marriage, their legal responses differ greatly. A marriage made under pressure, threats, or violence can usually be declared legally void. Only a small minority of states explicitly provide for the annulment or termination of a forced marriage, while many others do not offer annulment at all, leaving divorce as the only legal option. In some jurisdictions where annulment is permitted, survivors face strict time limits for filing a claim. For example, 5 years in France, 3 years in Iceland, and only 1 year in Lithuania. Even when the law allows annulment, survivors often struggle to access it due to financial dependence, social isolation, lack of legal awareness, or fear of retaliation. These barriers, combined with wide variation in national legal systems and the influence of cultural, religious, and customary practices, make the legal dissolution of forced marriages extremely difficult in practice. According to the International Labour Organization, at least 22 million people are currently estimated to be living in forced marriages worldwide. When it comes to human trafficking, according to UNODC latest 2024 data, 1% of identified victims of trafficking were trafficked for the purposes of forced marriage. That would mean only over 2,000 identified individuals. However, it should be remembered that this represents only a tiny fraction of the actual scale. Data on trafficking in the context of forced marriage is particularly difficult to estimate. Who is affected? Most of the victims identified are women and girls. However, the impact on boys and men is less researched. For LGBTQIA+ people, forced marriage is often a form of honor-based abuse. It can be used by families and communities to control someone's sexuality and/or gender identity. Experts agree that in regions where forced marriage is widespread, trafficking for the purpose of forced marriage is also likely to be high, even if it is not formally recognized or recorded as human trafficking. Nearly 2/3 of all forced marriages are found in Asia and the Pacific. According to the 2024 data, victims trafficked for forced marriage were identified mostly in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Western and Southern Europe. Very often, the abuse that occurs in forced marriages is hidden by the institution of marriage itself, where traditional gender roles, expectations of sexuality, and divisions of labor are normalized. Victims may hear statements like, "I've paid for you, so now you must do whatever I tell you to do." In some cases, people are exploited through the marriage for sexual exploitation, including forced prostitution and the creation of sexual abuse material. Domestic servitude. This can occur either in the spouse's household or in the household of third parties. Forced labor, for example, in agriculture, to the financial and personal benefit of the spouse and/or his or her family. Forced begging, forced pregnancy, or forced criminal activities. The three most commonly identified forms of exploitation accompanying trafficking for the purpose of forced marriage are sexual exploitation and/or sex trafficking, forced labor, and domestic servitude. These forms of exploitation often occur simultaneously, particularly sexual exploitation and domestic servitude. Forced marriage, including cases that constitute human trafficking, is a human rights violation that can lead to forced labor, sexual exploitation, reproductive coercion, and physical or psychological abuse. While some progress has been made, alarming trends persist. Normalizing child and forced marriage and failing to set 18 as the minimum marriage age significantly increases risks of abuse and trafficking. Learn more about human trafficking, its complexity, and anti-trafficking efforts through our other educational videos and resources available on our website. Thank you for joining us in this crucial mission.